Jason, thanks for being here. I know it can be a little strange to come on a podcast and talk about your ongoing injuries, so I do appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate appreciate talking to you. You're the expert, and I've been listening to you for a while, so I'm excited to talk to you. So yeah, I'm 46 years old, so I've been running kind of my whole life, other than about a 10-year period. I ran track as a sprinter, went to state. That's about it. Then didn't go any further than that, and then off and on ran some distance for a while there. Did some tough mudders, did some half marathons, did there's a I'm in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and there's a 25K that's pretty known throughout the country. Done a few of those too. Then took a 10-year break, got fat, didn't run, and then kind of COVID hit, and I had a buddy like saying, "Hey man, it's time to go," and so I started working out again, started running, started losing weight, and yeah, so I've been back for about 2 years, and this next week will be my third half marathon. So
All right. Well, you have a good friend over there getting you back into running.
I know, it was good for both of us.
That's great. So you've been running now for about 2 years more consistently after your break. And I know that you're experiencing some knee pain, some knee issues. When did that start?
So I would say almost right away when I started retraining, but it doesn't come till about halfway through the training. So obviously you slowly increase mileage and intensity and stuff like that. And then it would just be around the knee. I went to a chiro slash PT. That's the extent of what I've done for it. And he was pretty confident that it was just around the knee. So it was muscles and weakness. And so that was just the left knee. But then this training session, it's kind of been a little bit of both, more left than right. But it's the same kind of pain on the right. So I'm like, okay, something's going on. Something's not broke or ripped or torn. It's something's weak or needs more work.
Yeah. So this didn't happen in a scenario where there was an acute, all at once, sudden injury. This was more of a gradual onset of pain, right?
That's correct. It was onset gradual. Yep.
And do you have a formal diagnosis for what kind of injury it might be? I mean, you're not dealing with IT band syndrome, which usually presents with pain on the side of the knee. Patellofemoral pain syndrome is often associated with pain somewhere along the kneecap itself. Do you have a specific injury that your PT has said that you're suffering from right now?
No, he didn't say. I did suffer from I think the first training or the second bad IT stuff, but for whatever reason, I've been able to correct that, whether it's consistent rolling or whatever. I do not have that issue anymore, but no official diagnosis from anything. I haven't been to a running doc or anything like that. So
All right, so you've been dealing with some knee issues, and it seems like this is uh, an issue that's all around your knee, stemming from maybe some instability, maybe some muscle weakness. Let's get an idea of the kind of running that you're doing right now. Can you paint us a picture of your training right now? Miles per week, maybe what those miles per week is like in the context of your history. So, for example, if you're running, say, 25 miles a week, is that low for you? Is that high for you? Give us a picture of what you're doing right now.
the current training plan is Monday cross train, Tuesday sprints or speed work, either tempo or 400s. Wednesday weight training. I'll put that in quotes. Thursday just a slow run, and then Friday off. Saturday long run. Sunday off. Friday they say yoga, but I haven't really done much of that either. But this training, the max miles was last week for me, and it was only 22 miles, which it doesn't seem like a lot. I told my friend that got me back into running, I was like, "Gosh, I want to run more, but I'm trying to stick with the plan that I was given or what I decided to follow." So, yeah, the most I've ran is 22 miles in 1 week. So
Okay. What is your long run like in a 22-ish mile week?
it was 12.
12. Okay. And are you doing any faster training sessions, any workouts?
Uh, for with running,
Yeah.
just yeah, on Tuesdays I do the tempo run or the 400s.
Got it. Okay. So you're doing a weekly workout. You've built your long run to 12 miles. you've built your overall weekly mileage to a peak of 22 miles a week. And you are doing some strength training. What's your strength training look like?
Well, my strength training looks like what I've learned from you. I kind of started listening to the podcast, so I'm really just doing the ballista and the Mac. Nothing really with actual weights other than like, the kettlebell where you're kind of doing I don't even remember what it's called, but you're leaning over, putting one leg out. So I'm actually not lifting, doing anything like that at all. So that's what I've been doing on Wednesdays.
Okay, so you've got a Wednesday strength workout. Um, so I'm getting a good idea of what you're doing for all of your different types of training. And remind me how long you've been dealing with this knee pain that you're currently experiencing. Has this been like a week? Has it been 3 months? How long has it been?
Um, well, it will go away if I stop running, obviously, because once I'm done with my race, I do take some time off, and I still do run through the winter, just not as near as many miles or intensity. But I would say in this training session, it's been going on for about 2 months.
2 months. That's 2 months too long. That's maybe 6 weeks too long right there.
Yeah.
So you've seen a PT slash chiro who's looked at the knee, who's evaluated you. What kind of treatment are you currently doing for the knee? Is this stuff that maybe has been prescribed by your physical therapist or things that you're doing on your own?
Yeah, I'm basically right now he thinks that it's I don't know, but it's a muscle between the quad and the hamstring. Obviously, you would think, "Oh, that's the IT band," but there's another muscle in there. I don't know. He named it, but basically right now just really getting in with a lacrosse ball, trying to move that leg while I'm sitting on that area and screaming in pain. Just trying to keep that moving. And when he works on me, he's just it's not fun. Like it is painful. He is digging into those quads, and I mean, it's like it'll be sore for 2 days after he's done. So I mean, this guy he gets in there.
Yeah, I've been there too. Sometimes you get on the table and you're seeing stars, you're seeing
Yes,
God. It's a it can be a real experience.
yes, again.
Uh, Let me ask you this. What do you think is helping your knee pain? So, in other words, I'm sure you've tried a bunch of different things. You know, you're foam rolling, you're doing some strength work, you might be stretching, you might be getting that manual therapy with your PT. What actually do you think is providing you with some relief?
Honestly, I mean, and it might be placebo, but I've been wearing this knee brace when I run, and it really doesn't bother me a ton when I run, which is so weird, right? So I do a manual job where I stand on a machine, I fertilize lawns, and it actually bothers me more while I'm working than actually running. So I'm sure it heats up, all the muscles are getting warm and loose, so when I'm running, it's not so bad, but it doesn't really cause me too much trouble running. But I would say that brace, I mean, I don't know, it feels better when I wear it when I work out.
Huh. That actually, to me, is almost a little bit encouraging, you know? Like
Okay.
it doesn't mean that this is an injury that running is making substantially worse because, look, you're going out there running, you're covering 22-ish miles a week, you've gotten in a 12-mile long run, and it doesn't seem to bother you too much while you're running. And whenever I'm kind of thinking about injuries and whether or not we should train through them, I always ask runners, these kind of three questions. Number one, does the pain get worse as you run? And so it doesn't seem like the pain is getting any worse as you go running. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, you get the twinges here and there, you know what I mean? It's not completely pain-free, but it does not get worse.
Okay, so that's really good. And then when you do experience some of that discomfort, is it sharp or stabbing, or is it a little more like dull and achy and just a general discomfort?
Dull, achy,
Okay.
yeah, it doesn't just go yeah, because that mean it would ruin my stride, right? If it was like sharp, I would be like, whoa, like I would have to kind of, and I don't really, I just like, have to do that. I'm just like, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of annoying. All right, it went away.
Right. So you're feeling it, but you're not necessarily feeling like, someone putting a needle into your knee or
No,
something really acute.
no, not like that.
Okay, so that's more good news. And the last question I would always ask is if you're out there running and you're feeling your knee a little bit, do you have to alter your running form to be able to keep running and finish the run or run pain free?
No, I do not.
Okay. So you've passed my three-pronged test here with flying colors. So for me, I'm very encouraged by this. I would actually not really label this a serious injury. I mean, you're obviously training through it. You've got this race on the schedule, and the race is happening. Is it this weekend or is it next weekend?
Next weekend. Yep. Yep. It's a half marathon. Yep.
All right. And so you've got in that 12-mile long run, which tells me that you're not going to have any problems finishing the half marathon on race day. So far, I think you're good to go for now. So that's my test to see if you can finish up this training cycle, if you can run the race, and maybe after the race is a good opportunity for you to focus on, let's finally kick this thing, get healthy so they don't have to deal with any of these knee problems. It's probably going to be challenging to both treat the problem and get ready for the race at the same time. I always like to tell runners, let's focus on one thing at a time. Really hard to treat an injury and train for a race at that same time. So, what I'm thinking is after your race, let's really go sort of ham on treating this injury, on getting healthy and pain free. Um, have a couple more questions too. Have you ever discovered that there's certain types of running, whether that's maybe a faster workout or a long run, certain types of cross training that tend to be more aggravating for your knee?
Yeah, it's definitely the speed workout. I think I was built to be to run fast in shorter distances because when I do that stuff, I'm like, I mean, for me, obviously, I'm hauling, I'm putting it all in. I while I hate the 400s, I also feel really good when I'm done with them. I love the tempo run. The tempo run is like, oh, that's my jam. But yeah, it definitely is a little bit more sore the next day with those speed workouts.
Yeah, and that's not surprising to me. I would say of all the types of work we do in our training as runners, likely the most stressful is the faster work that we're doing. Any kind of faster training session or speed work, that's really going to put the most stress on our bodies because that is when we're experiencing the most impact force. That's when we're really, taking the most number of steps, even. So there's a lot more stress in those kinds of scenarios. Um, what are you doing right now to address the knee pain that you're experiencing besides
Um,
that, the brace on your knee?
yeah, I ice when I get home. Um, initially right away, and then I will apply some heat periodically if I'm working at the desk or whatever. I do take quite a bit of CBD. I'm a huge proponent of that for inflammation, but I'm not really taking any meds or anything. It's not that bad. Now, I wouldn't put it past me to take some ibuprofen about a half hour before my half marathon, but we'll see. I don't know, but yeah, I'm really not taking anything other than the CBD to help that.
Okay. Yeah. And if that's giving you some relief, then I don't really think there's anything damaging or negative or harmful that can come from that. Have you ever had a gait analysis where, someone looks at your running form, whether that's, a super formal one where you're in a running lab and they've got you hooked up to a bunch of stuff, or even just at a shoe store where you're getting on a treadmill and someone's just looking at you going for a run?
Yeah, I've definitely done the shoe store one. Nothing super formal. So
Did they tell you anything about your stride? And we should be clear that if you go to a shoe store and you get a running form analysis, it is not as formal, as detailed, as comprehensive as what you're going to experience in a running lab. But nevertheless, it's a good opportunity for someone just to spot any major red flags. So if there's something serious that's happening with your form, that's a good place for them to spot it. So did they tell you anything about your form that, is something that you might be wanting to work on?
no, the only thing they said is I do strike more with my forefront or foot at the front than I'm not a heel striker or anything. That was about the extent of of the test. So
Okay. Well, Jason, one of the things I've noticed is that you're doing a fair amount of passive recovery techniques, everything from icing the knee, heating the knee, getting some manual therapy on the table with your PT. That's you just kind of laying there while he manipulates the musculature and the tissues. Um, and I think there's some value in all that kind of work. It can certainly provide relief, but I do think active recovery and more active treatments are probably going to be more effective at helping you feel better in the long term. So now we get to the point where we get to figure out what to do about this knee issue of yours. So I think from now until your half marathon, you should do whatever you can to feel your best. So that's probably going to be, let's avoid any super hard workouts. I mean, you're tapering right now, so you probably don't have any more really hard workouts anymore. Let's be a little bit more cautious with that because that's also the work that's the most stressful for your knee. I think it would be a good idea to wear your knee brace either every run or at least the faster workouts and definitely for the half marathon itself. Are you currently wearing the knee brace every time you go running?
I have for the last 2 weeks.
Okay. Well, I think for now that's a good idea. It's working for you. It's reducing pain. It's going to help you get through this half marathon, and I think that's a good approach. And
Okay.
then once you run the half and take a little bit of time off, I think then is where, okay, now let's sort of try to revamp your training a little bit. Let's try to get you in a position where you're not necessarily treating a knee issue, you're sort of training in a way that is going to prevent this problem from happening in the future. Because I don't necessarily think that this is such a major problem where you've got to spend a dedicated, 3 to 5 weeks going to the PT's office 3 times a week with a very complicated treatment protocol. Because at the end of the day, you can still run. You're going to race a half marathon and not really experience any sharp pain, any debilitating sort of injuries. So I'm feeling very optimistic about this. I would say that maybe the number one thing that you could potentially do to reduce any knee pain in the future is start a more consistent strength training habit. You're already doing some of our routines. I think you're doing the mace routine and the ballista routine. The mace routine is a single leg strength routine, so that can be really helpful at working on some imbalances. And then the ballista routine is, what I would call a 3D strength routine. So you're working in all three planes of motion, and that can be really helpful. But instead of doing this kind of work once a week, I think we should do it almost every day.
Hmm.
And, like you said, you're not throwing around, weighted barbells in the weight room like crazy. These are mostly body weight oriented types of strength routines. And that means they're not overly stressful. A lot of these exercises are taken from the world of physical therapy. So they're going to not only help you get stronger and improve your range of motion, improve your general athleticism, but they're also going to be very therapeutic and they're really going to fix any imbalances or weaknesses that you might have. So, I have this concept called the sandwiching kind of method. It's just an approach where every run is sandwiched in between a dynamic warm up and then a post run core or strength workout that should be running specific. So if you're doing a dynamic warm up before you're going running, that's really going to help warm you up for the run itself. And a lot of the times it can help clear out some of the cobwebs in your legs. It can help loosen you up and really just allow you to go from sedentary to running in a much more effective way. You're essentially bridging that gap between sedentary and running. And I think that's really helpful if you're injury prone, if you're a master's runner, if you just have a history of these kind of injuries. A dynamic warm up is going to be that first line of defense. Let's get warm. And I think you mentioned earlier, it does feel a little bit better once you're warmed up, once you've been using your muscles. And so that warm up routine can be really helpful at providing some of that relief even before you start running. And the other great thing about a dynamic warm up is that it includes some strength training. So you're going to get a little bit of a dose of strength training in your warm up. And it's kind of like sneaking vegetables into a food that you like. You're getting some good stuff, and it's not a formal strength workout. You're not really doing anything too difficult. And then after your runs, let's do some other routines like ballista, like the mace routine. And these routines are on Strength Running. Anyone listening can go get these routines, they're free. But we have so many other routines. You could do the standard core routine, you could do the gauntlet plank workout, the ITB rehab routine. We've got the tomahawk medicine ball workout, and I'll follow up with you via email and send you links to all these different workouts that you can do. And since you're on Team Strength Running, we do have a bunch of other routines in our members area that you can sample as well. And if you're doing one of these routines after every one of your runs, and after the race, maybe you're not running as much as you are right now, it might be a good idea to maybe do a routine 5 days out of the week. So 5 of 7 days, you're actually doing one of these easier strength routines. And after 4 weeks, 6 weeks, maybe you want to start making them a little bit more challenging. So you can start adding bands, you can start using a kettlebell, or if you really want to kind of take a big bite out of this weightlifting apple here, you can actually go to a gym and do some weightlifting. I would say that's not necessary. I don't think you necessarily have to do that. I actually think the body weight oriented strength training is going to be a little bit more therapeutic. Like that's what you're going to do if you go see a PT and they're like, okay, we've got some weakness here. They're going to have you go through a bunch of assessments and then do strength training exercises that are going to help strengthen all the surrounding musculature around your knee. So I think that's a really good place to start is let's just make sure that we're doing a fair amount of very consistent strength work, because that really helps build some athleticism and that range of motion. And you're just going to feel better on a day-to-day basis. Like running's great. I mean, look at me. Like my whole life revolves around running, right? I love the sport. It's my passion. But at the same time, I recognize it's a fairly one-dimensional activity. We've got to do some other things to build up our bodies in different ways so that we don't break down. Now, I'm a little curious too about maybe your history with strength training. You said you were a sprinter. Sprinters usually have like a little bit of a better relationship with strength training than us distance runners. So I'm curious if you've ever gotten into strength training in the past in a little bit more of a bigger way.
See, no, because I'm old. I'm 46, so was running in the early 90s. It was like, hey, there's your shoes. Let's go. There's the starting blocks. Like there was no weightlifting. There was no dynamic stretching. It was just stretch a little here and let's go. So I don't have much in history at all with weightlifting. I did a couple years, or like the first year I started running again, I was training at there's a club called F45. So it's like functional weightlifting, you know what I mean? Not like you're at a gym like deadlifting or anything like that. But that's about it. I don't really have much experience at all with weightlifting.
Okay. Well, I actually think that that means you stand to gain more by starting any kind of strength training. And even though I think weight training in a gym, actual weightlifting, is really beneficial for runners, I also recognize that it's not 100% necessary. I would love to see every runner do it. But if you don't have a home gym, if you don't want to get to a commercial gym, or you're just not interested, frankly, then we can go very far with just some body weight exercises in those different routines. And I would definitely encourage you to follow a formal routine rather than just trying to string together a bunch of exercises that you saw on a website somewhere, or you're on menshealth.com or whatever, and you're reading the top 3 great exercises for knees. Let's actually follow a more running specific routine, because then you really just have to um, memorize the routine. You just know the order of exercises, and then you're going to say to myself, okay, today I'm doing the ballista routine. You don't have to remember all 8 exercises. You just know you're doing that one routine. You know it has an endpoint, and that really helps with adherence. Because I don't know if you're like me. If I am busy at all or I'm short on time, this is the work that gets canceled first.
Oh yeah.
Is all of the post run work, all of the little extras that shouldn't even really be considered extras. They are the things that enable our running. So if you can follow those routines, I think you're going to stand to gain a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, weightlifting is not high on my list. When I did do Tough Mudder, I did a lot of upper body weights because it's a lot of grabbing, and I was like, I got strong legs, which proved to be true. I did, but even with that, I'm not a huge fan of it. But yeah, your exercises, those routines are pretty quick. Most of them I got them memorized, but yeah, I don't do them very often at all, other than just once a week. So I definitely need to get after that. So.
Yeah, and you're definitely going to feel a lot more progress when you do it consistently. Because I think once a week is probably not enough. It's sort of like running once a week. You're not really going to get too much training adaptation or progress from just running once a week. And these routines are easy enough where you can do them most days of the week. It's not like lifting heavy weight in the gym, which I would say is more akin to doing a faster workout on the track or like a long run. You need to recover from that. You need either an easy day or a recovery day. But all those body weight routines, those are more like short, easy runs. You can do those day after day after day. And the recovery you get from 24 hours and a night's sleep is plenty when it comes to recovering from those routines. Um, I think the other thing that I think might be helpful for you is spending a little bit of time away from very hard workouts. So maybe it would be helpful to get an idea of when you started this current training cycle, when your knees started to hurt. Did they start to hurt before or after you first started doing faster workouts? And my second question is, how soon into the training cycle did you start those faster workouts?
Well, the cycle that or the training cycle that I have now, it's right away. I mean, obviously they build up, like I think the first week was 400s, you know what I mean? And then a tempo run. And I really have trouble going slow. Like that is my biggest downfall and what I've been working, like my recovery runs. Like I look at my watch more on recovery runs than I do actually on speed workouts because I keep going too fast. So my guess is that's was part of the problem. I went too fast, but yeah, the speed workouts happen right away. It's just the tempo runs are smaller and the amount of 400s are smaller.
Yeah.
And I would, and your question was when did the knee? It's usually about halfway through a training cycle, which I think this was a 16-week plan or 15 weeks, so it's usually about halfway it starts creeping in.
Okay. Yeah, I'm starting to think that if you give yourself some time to get strong, if you give yourself some time to build a base of easy mileage, and that can include some faster running, but it shouldn't include too much difficult running. And there's definitely a difference between fast and hard, right? Like we can run strides. You can do a really simple fartlek workout, maybe something like 6 times a minute at a relatively quicker pace. We don't even really need to label it, 10K pace or half marathon pace. As long as you're getting some exposure to running fast. Strides is another good example where that probably won't bother your knee because it's just such a short effort at a faster pace that it's probably not going to be enough to really cause any issues. If you can give yourself the time, maybe it could be as short as a couple weeks, maybe as long as 2 months, where you're really focusing on getting stronger. So, okay, I'm going to do some strength training 5 days a week. Maybe if you're going to be weightlifting, you can limit it to 2 days a week, and then a couple more days you can do that body weight work. But 5 days a week of some strength training, I'm going to cut out all my faster workouts. I'm just going to run easy. Maybe I'll do some strides. Maybe I'll do a very easy workout during the week. I think what you're going to do is build a foundation of strength, of endurance, and that's then going to support your next training cycle. Because I think the hardest thing about jumping into a training cycle is that you sort of have to be ready to do all the things that are in that cycle, right? You have to be ready to do a long run. You have to be ready to do a faster workout. And sometimes you need a base phase of training. You just need to get your legs underneath you. You need to build some capacity for that harder work that's to come. And it can be really hard to do that if you're jumping into a training cycle from rest and you're not giving yourself that period of base phase of training. So I think a base phase can be really helpful for you. Would that drive you crazy as a former sprinter not to run fast very often?
No, but I will be honest with you. I skipped the first 2 weeks of the training because it was so little, like it was so small. Like I just kept doing whatever I was doing, and that was just running more, I guess. And I don't know. Yeah, it would bother me, but I plan on not starting maybe a training cycle till February, so I got plenty of time. And I'm gonna try to do what I did last year, is just do a quote unquote long run on the weekends and maybe one easy run, and then I did a lot of rucking. I don't know if you're familiar with rucking. I did a lot of that too, so there wasn't a ton of running, but I always kept a little bit of a base.
Yeah, I think rucking is actually pretty great. It can be really fantastic at building stronger legs, which is kind of interesting because you're just walking, but it's
Yeah.
weighted walking, and so it's very functional in that regard. Um, but at the same time, you're not exposing your knees or really any of your like musculature or joints to the same kind of impact forces, which can be over 5 times your body weight. Whereas if you're walking, I think the max is roughly 3 times your body weight. So, you're certainly adding on some extra weight with a weighted backpack. But with that said, that can be really helpful at building some very functional strength uh, in the muscles around your knee. I would also just encourage you to try to run at least 3 days a week. Maybe that quote unquote longer run on the weekend, and then maybe 2 shorter runs during the week, just because running is a more power based activity than walking. You have to leave the ground to technically be considered running. And that flight phase of the stride, it does it's just so different than walking that we need to be practicing it regularly so that our body isn't so not used to the force of running and the impact force and just the very kind of up and down nature of running. So I do think at least 3 days a week is a really good idea, even if you're taking a couple months, that couple months of time in between training cycles. Let's maintain your ability to run with at least 3 days and then over index a little bit on strength. Kind of think of yourself as, I'm going to be more consistent with strength training during this phase of training than I actually am with my running. And that's going to really build up your capacity for more running before you even need to do the running itself.
Okay. Yeah, I never thought about that. Like I said, I wanted to rest my legs, and so that's why I was like, I'll do rucking, so it's not such a hard impact. But yeah, I think those 3 days a week, you're wanting me to go slow though, like recovery run pace, right? Not, and that's the
Yeah, we're
tough
not
part.
doing workouts. We're just going to run super easy. If you want to do strides once a week, that's great, but let's not
I
do a
just,
workout.
I just get so bored. I mean, I
You don't
even
have to
listen to
run for a
podcasts.
long time, maybe 3 to 5 miles.
Yeah, it's just like it's not. I mean, when I say bored, it's just like I feel like. Doesn't it feel like on those recovery runs, like you're just not doing any work? You're like you could just sing a song or have a full conversation. You're just like, am I even doing anything? Your heart rate's like barely hitting. Was it aerobic? And I don't know. Sometimes I just struggle. My mind is like goes really fast. I don't know if it's my ADHD or what. So it's like I like the. It's really hard for me to go slow, but I'll work on it for sure.
Yeah, and look, Jason, we're exactly the same in that way. I just like to run fast. I like to push the envelope. I like to go hard. But I think one of the things that I am getting more and more behind as I get a little bit older and that as I learn more about training is that you can actually do a fair amount of zone one running, and that's still really beneficial for your overall training. You can look at Elliot Kipchoge's world record marathon training. He has an extraordinary amount of zone one and zone two running that he's doing on a weekly basis. And, the same thing with some of the best ultra marathoners in the world. They do a lot of very easy training because that's actually the training that builds general endurance the best. Once you start getting into zone three, it's this really interesting zone where you can easily overdo it. You can easily get into that point where it's not hard enough to really elicit all the great speed and fitness adaptations that we're really looking for, but it's also not easy enough to give you some of the general endurance adaptations that you also want. So it's this in between gray zone training that can be really hard for a lot of runners to escape from because it feels like you're working. It feels like you're getting in some hard work. And so you feel good about it, right? You're like, hey, I did some good work today. I got in a sweat. My muscles feel like they've been worked, but it's not actually in service of our long-term running goals. So I think one of the things that we can work on is potentially slowing down some of your easy runs so that they're in a more comfortable, conversational, you know, um, controlled type of effort, and that's really going to help reduce the stress on your body while at the same time not negatively impacting your fitness gains in any way. So you're still going to reach any running goals that you might have for yourself in the future, while at the same time also reducing your injury risk. So that I think is going to be a really helpful strategy for you.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It's just weird to hear that going slow will be good in the tail end. You know what I mean? I mean, if you think the same way I do, then you're kind of like, come on, let's just get after it.
Yeah, I want to get after it, but sometimes getting after it means just running slow.
Yeah.
It was funny. We did a recent podcast episode with Matt Meyer. He's a sub elite runner. He doesn't have Nike knocking on his door or anything. He's run 2:34 in the marathon, and
Oof.
he runs a lot of his runs 2.5 to 3 minutes slower than his marathon pace. Which, when you start doing the math on that, it's actually quite slow. And he is really strong. He regularly runs over 100 miles a week. And I think that was episode 268 for folks who want to maybe go back and listen to that one. And we talk a lot about the value of easy running. And even the interesting perspective on that is that easy running becomes almost mandatory when you're training really hard, because in between your long days, in between those hard workouts, you've just got to run easy enough so that you don't get hurt. So if you are dealing with these kinds of niggles and discomfort, one of the first things that I'm going to do is cut out intensity, because that's the most stressful, potentially damaging aspect of your training. And that can come in many different forms. It can be avoiding hard workouts, but it can also be just slowing down some of your easy runs.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a plan.
All right. Now, you did say before we started recording that you've been dealing with some other little issues as well, because, when it rains, it pours, right?
I mean, this one is weird. So I'm going to try to pronounce it because I did get a diagnosis for this. It's on the bottom of my foot. It's called sesamotitis. So
Oh,
it's
yes.
am I saying it wrong or am I close?
I actually don't know how to pronounce it, and I'm definitely going to embarrass myself if I tried. Sesamoiditis.
Yeah, my wife's a nurse and I said it really bad and she's like, "Ooh, that's definitely not it." You know what I mean? But yeah, so I went into a running doc and they took some x-rays and there's a little bone there and I somehow was born with that bone having a split in it. Not a crack, but a split, and both my feet are like that. And just like the knee, as I build in mileage, I get pain there, which is, you know, they are going to send me to PT. I actually paused it because I was training for this race. I'm like, I don't have time. I have a full-time job and I'm doing all kinds of extracurricular. I just didn't have time. But yeah, I'm dealing with that too. And the only thing I did on that is I changed my shoe brand. Went to I'm sure you've heard of it. It's called, I think it's Topo,
Yep, yep.
TOPO, and they got a huge toe box. And then I dropped my lift a little bit from 8 to 5 to put less pressure on that. So it seemed to help. It took longer before the pain started to creep in, but yeah, I'm dealing with that too. So I don't know anything about that. That's as far as I've gotten with that. So
Yeah, that injury is a little bit more rare, but it's essentially irritation or inflammation right under the ball of your foot. And you said earlier you're a 4-foot striker, so I'm not entirely surprised to hear that you're
yeah.
dealing with a 4-foot type injury. Usually what's recommended for something like this is just rest and anti-inflammatories, which doesn't really help the issue at all. So, a couple things to think about. Number one, I think shoe choice is a good thing for you to look into. You probably are going to want some slightly more cushioned shoes to give yourself a little bit more shoe between you and the ground. The other thing you might want to look at is not aggressively forefoot striking when you're out running. Um, it's really hard to change how you run, and I'm always very hesitant to advocate for form changes, especially if you're not doing it under the close supervision of a gait specialist or someone who can really see you run on a day-to-day basis. But some helpful cues to help with that is try to focus on putting your foot down underneath you, and just that kind of cue as you're out there running, just that thought can really help you put your foot down underneath you in more of a piston sort of manner, rather than maybe reaching out in front of you and really trying to strike the ground with your forefoot. Now, of course, it really depends on how you run. That cue might not be helpful whatsoever, but for anyone who might be dealing with that issue, it could be an avenue just to provide a little bit more relief. The other thing that I might say is, you mentioned being on your feet a lot for work. You might want to look into your professional shoes, what kind of shoes you're wearing for work. Maybe you could get shoes with more cushioning. Maybe you get some sort of insert that gives you, in particular, more cushioning right under the forefoot, and that could be helpful. Is this something that you deal with when you're not running as well? Does it provide any sort of discomfort when you're doing other activities?
Typically no. It stops when I'm done running. Towards these last couple weeks, I've noticed a little bit with work, but it's funny you bring up the work boots. Tried those new shoes, and there's so much room in there. I'm like, I wear Red Wing boots, and I when I put them on in the morning, I'm like, oh my gosh, these are so tight. So I'm gonna be changing my footwear to, and I know Red Wing does make a wide toe box. I'm like, I am all about those shoes now. Anything not like my topo shoes, I'm just like, these are terrible. So definitely something for me to look at. But yeah, for the most part, once I'm done running, within an hour it's recovered and I don't really feel it. But yeah, like after my 12 miles last week, I felt it for a day or two, but it's usually just in the higher mileage.
Yeah, and I think, high-heeled shoes can certainly contribute to that, because they're just gonna put you in that elevated position where you're just putting more stress on the ball of your foot. So finding a shoe that has a slightly lower heel toe drop, where your weight distribution can be a little bit more even, maybe a little bit more resting on your heel, might actually be quite helpful for something like that. But if you if you go see a PT, they're probably going to tell you, well, you should stop running and just take Advil for the rest of your life, and we don't want that.
Well, thankfully, the PT I'm going to is at like a it's not a running lab, but it's a legit physical sports lab. They have a lot of runner PTs in there, so uh I I'm a seasonal worker, obviously, and so in about 2 weeks, I'm going to restart that PT prescription and go in there for that foot issue. But yeah, they're going to tell you to rest it. I'm like, bro, like I'm running, like I don't want to rest it. Let's figure out another way. But it is kind of preventing me from wanting to do my ultimate goal of run a marathon. I just don't know if I can handle that heavy mileage with the knee and that. Maybe one problem at a time. You know what I mean? But
Yeah. Well, I'm very encouraged by the fact that your PT is someone who sees other runners. This isn't, a random doctor in a clinic who just sees the general population. This is a population of athletes, of
yep.
people who go running. And usually those PTs are just going to be much more effective. They understand the fact that you need to go running. You need to go rucking. You need this for your mental health. This is part of who you are, and they're not going to tell you just to not do the thing that you love to do. So they're going to really understand that and help you develop a solution, rather than just telling you to avoid the activity that's causing you pain. So, yeah, I think shoe changes, maybe some form changes. I would maybe talk to your PT about that when you restart PT after your half in a couple weeks. Maybe ask them to look at your running form. They probably have a treadmill at this facility, and they can look at you run and just see if maybe your forefoot strike is just fine. but maybe it's a little bit too aggressive, and there's a way that you can slightly tweak it so that you're just putting less stress on your forefoot, and that could be something that could be really helpful.
Would you recommend a further drop on the heel? I went from an 8 to a 5. I mean, obviously you can go down to a 0 if you wanted to, but
It might be something worth experimenting with, but going from 8 to 0 in terms of like doing all your mileage in an 8 millimeter drop shoe and then transitioning to all your mileage in a zero drop shoe, now I'm worried that you're going to get Achilles tendinopathy or,
yeah.
some sort of soleus or calf issue because you're running in a shoe that is substantially lower uh, in a heel drop perspective than what you're used to. So we should always take these kinds of changes very gradually. I think you could experiment, maybe one short run a week you do in a zero drop shoe just to see how you like it. And just make sure that the zero drop shoe has some good cushion underneath because there's a lot of zero drop shoes that have a very low stack height and they're very close to the ground. So
Mm.
that's probably not a shoe that's going to work for you.
Right, right. Yeah, no. We need some cushion under there.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Jason, I don't think I solved all of your problems today. I didn't think I was going to, but I at least hope that we've we've got some good ideas moving forward so that you at least have a plan, you at least have some different things to try in your training so that you're not just sitting there floundering not knowing where to go next. I think a base phase of training where you're running mostly slow, where you're doing a fair amount of strength training, especially some more corrective therapeutic PT oriented body weight strength training, and then just really just trying to build that base of endurance as well as that base of strength. That's probably going to be the best thing for you, compared with what you're doing right now. Because I think what you're doing now can be helpful at pain management, at getting you through this race. But I don't know if it's addressing the root cause of your knee pain right now.
Yeah, I know it's not. I mean, obviously if I stop running and it'll go away. I mean, I know it will, obviously, but it didn't solve the problem. It just whatever I was, the force I was putting out of it's not there anymore. And it's like, okay, we don't hurt anymore, so we're good. So
Yeah. Well, it seems like you also have some really good support around you. You've got at least one friend who's pushing
yeah,
you and getting you into shape and encouraging you. That's great. And then you have that physical therapist who understands athletes. It can really give you some more formal direction. So I'm pretty encouraged by what I've heard on, during this conversation. This isn't a serious injury. You can still run, and there's a lot of opportunity for improvement after this race. And I think that starts with some good strength training.
yeah, it sounds like it. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I hope you come back on and let us know how you're doing, maybe beginning of 2023. Hopefully by then you're gearing up for your first marathon with healthy, happy knees.
Yeah, me too.
All right, Jason. Well, I really appreciate your time today. Thank you.
Thank you.